The emergency lights flashed red across the underground command center buried 3 kilometers beneath Geneva. President Walsh hurried down the metal corridor, her footsteps echoing against the concrete walls. The message had arrived just 2 hours ago, and already the world's most powerful leaders were gathering in the crisis room that humanity hoped they would never need to use. The war had been raging for 3 brutal years. What started as a simple misunderstanding when human colony ships met alien patrol fleets had grown into something much larger and more dangerous. The Galactic Confederation, a group of 6 alien species, seemed determined to stop human expansion into space at any cost. Every attempt at communication had failed. Every battle had cost lives on both sides. Ambassador David Reed was already waiting when Walsh entered the main chamber. The room looked more like a military bunker than a place for diplomacy, with thick metal walls and screens showing star maps of the conflict zones. Reed stood next to a large holographic projector in the center of the room, his face showing the stress of 3 years managing an impossible situation. "Madam President," Reed said, nodding respectfully as she approached. The message came through on all frequencies at once. They wanted to make sure we received it. Admiral Stone arrived. Moments later, his uniform crisp despite being called from his bed in the middle of the night. Behind him came the heads of the major space agencies, the Secretary of Defense and several other officials, whose faces showed the same mix of hope and worry that Walsh felt in her chest. "Show me," Walsh said simply. Reed activated the holographic projector. The air above the device shimmered, then formed into the image of a tall, blue-skinned creature with multiple arms and large compound eyes that reflected light like diamonds. When it spoke, the translation device converted its words into clear English that filled the room. "People of Earth," the alien said, its voice carrying a formal tone that suggested careful preparation. "I am Speaker Voss of the Cathari delegation. The Galactic Confederation has decided to offer your species one final opportunity to avoid total destruction." Walsh felt her stomach tighten. The word destruction carried weight that made everyone in the room shift uncomfortably. The alien continued, "You will send exactly 1 vessel to the coordinates that will be transmitted with this message. This vessel will carry representatives authorized to speak for your entire species. You will arrive at the designated location within 30 of your Earth days. Any deviation from these instructions, any attempt to bring additional vessels, or any hostile action will result in the immediate termination of all peace negotiations." The hologram paused, and Speaker Voss seemed to look directly at each person in the room, even though Walsh knew the message had been recorded. "Understand this clearly," the alien said. "This is not a request. This is your final chance to surrender, with some dignity and tact. Your species has proven more resilient than we expected, but you cannot win this war. Come to us, accept our terms, and your people may survive as a protected species under Confederation oversight. Refuse, and we will be forced to take more direct action against your homeworld." The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving the room in heavy silence. Walsh looked around at the faces of her advisors, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their expressions. They had all known this moment might come, but hearing the ultimatum spoken aloud made it real in a way that planning sessions never could. "How long do we have?" Walsh asked. "The coordinates put the meeting point in neutral space, about 18 days travel time with our fastest ships," Admiral Stone replied. "That gives us 12 days to decide what to send and who to send." "Any idea what kind of facility we're dealing with?" Reed consulted his tablet. "Intelligence suggests it's Harmony Station, a massive diplomatic complex that the Confederation uses for major negotiations. Neutral territory, heavily defended, designed to accommodate multiple species with different environmental needs." Walsh walked to the large screen showing the current positions of human and alien fleets. The red dots representing Confederation forces outnumbered the blue dots of human ships by almost 4 to 1. In pure military terms, the aliens were right. Humanity could not win a direct confrontation. "They want 1 ship," she said, thinking aloud. "What kind of message does that send? If we show up in a small diplomatic vessel, we look weak and desperate. If we send something with serious firepower, we look aggressive." Admiral Stone stepped forward. "Madam President, I have a suggestion that might sound crazy at first. At this point, Admiral, crazy might be exactly what we need. Stone took a deep breath. We send the Defiance. The room erupted in surprised voices. The UES Defiance was humanity's newest and most powerful warship, a massive vessel that had taken 3 years to build and represented the absolute peak of human military technology. It carried enough firepower to level a small moon and had never been defeated in battle. Admiral, Reed protested, that's hardly a diplomatic gesture. They specifically said any hostile action would end the negotiations. But what if we don't take any hostile action? Stone replied. What if we show up with the most powerful ship in human space, and then prove that we came there to talk, not fight? Walsh studied the Admiral's face. Stone had been fighting this war from the beginning and had seen more battles than anyone else in the room. If anyone understood the military situation, it was him. Explain your thinking, she said. Stone moved to the star map and pointed to the conflict zones. For 3 years, we've been fighting a defensive war. Every single battle has been them attacking our colonies or our supply lines. We've never once carried the fight to their territory. We've never attacked their homeworlds or their civilian populations. We've shown restraint that they probably don't even recognize. He turned back to face the group. What if we show them exactly how much restraint we've been showing? What if we arrive with a ship that could destroy their entire station, and then sit down at the negotiating table like civilized beings? The idea was bold, dangerous, and completely unexpected. Walsh could see the merit in it, but she could also see a dozen ways it could go wrong. The risk is enormous, she said. If they see it as a threat, they could attack before we even get close to the station. They could, Stone agreed, but I don't think they will. They want to talk, or they wouldn't have sent the message. They're confident they hold all the cards. Showing up with the Defiance might be the only way to get their attention and prove that we're not as helpless as they think. The debate continued for hours, but in the end the decision was unanimous. Humanity would send its most powerful warship to the peace talks and pray that the galaxy was ready for what that meant. The observation deck of the UES Defiance had never been designed for nervous diplomats. Ambassador David Reed pressed his face against the reinforced viewing port, watching the stars slowly shift as the massive warship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Somewhere ahead in the darkness lay Harmony Station, and either the future of human civilization or its end. Reed had spent the 18-day journey trying to prepare for every possible scenario. The diplomatic team had run through hundreds of practice negotiations, studied every scrap of intelligence about the alien species they would face, and memorized the cultural protocols that might mean the difference between peace and war. But now, with their destination finally visible as a distant speck of light, all that preparation felt inadequate. First visual contact, announced the ship's communication officer over the internal speakers. Harmony Station is coming into range. Reed made his way to the bridge where Captain Liu was studying the main display screen. The station that appeared before them was unlike anything human engineers had ever attempted. It looked like a small city floating in space, with multiple rings and habitat modules connected by a complex network of docking tubes and transport corridors. The whole structure slowly rotated, creating artificial gravity for its inhabitants. Impressive, Captain Liu said quietly. Intelligence reports estimated it could house about 50,000 beings, but seeing it in person makes you realize how small those numbers really are. Reed nodded, but his attention was focused on the dozens of ships surrounding the station. Most were clearly alien designs, with curves and angles that no human architect would have chosen. But their purpose was unmistakable. This was not just a diplomatic facility. It was a fortress. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. They're hailing us on multiple frequencies. Put it through, Liu ordered. The main screen shifted to show the interior of what appeared to be a command center. The being who faced them had the blue skin and compound eyes that Reed recognized from the original peace offer. This was a Kethari, one of the Confederation's founding species and their most skilled diplomats. Human vessel, the alien said, its translator rendering the words in crisp English. You have entered Confederation space aboard a military warship. This is highly irregular and potentially hostile. Explain your intentions. Captain Liu stepped forward. "This is Captain Liu of the UES Defiance. We are here in response to your invitation for peace negotiations. We come as requested, ready to discuss terms that will end this conflict." The Cathari's compound eyes seemed to shimmer with what Reed had learned was a sign of confusion or surprise. "Captain Liu, your vessel registers as a Class A military threat on our sensors. Our records indicate this ship carries enough firepower to destroy this entire facility. Why would you bring such a weapon to a diplomatic meeting?" Reed stepped into view of the camera. "I am Ambassador David Reed, speaking for the government of Earth and all human colonies. We brought this ship to demonstrate our commitment to these negotiations. The UES Defiance represents our finest military achievement, and yet we have traveled 18 days through space with our weapon systems powered down and our intentions peaceful." A long pause followed. Reed could imagine the frantic conversations happening on the other end of the transmission. Finally, the Cathari spoke again. "Ambassador Reed, you will understand that your choice of vessel has created significant concern among the station's population. We are transmitting approach vectors to Docking Bay 7. This is our largest military berth, the only one capable of accommodating a vessel of your size. You will maintain your current power configuration and make no aggressive moves during docking procedures." "Understood," Liu replied. "We will follow your vectors exactly." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Through the viewing screen, Reed could see other ships moving away from the station, clearly maintaining what they considered a safe distance from the approaching human warship. The docking procedure took over 3 hours. The Defiance was simply too large for normal diplomatic protocols. Specialized docking arms had to be extended, and the station's traffic control system had to reroute dozens of smaller vessels to accommodate the massive human ship. Throughout the process, Reed watched the faces of his diplomatic team, seeing his own nervous anticipation reflected in their expressions. "You know," said Dr. Emily Foster, the team's xenobiologist and cultural expert, "in all my studies of Confederation protocols, I never found a single record of a military vessel being used for peace negotiations. That's because no one has ever been crazy enough to try it before," replied James Park, the economic advisor who had spent months preparing trade proposals that might never see the light of day. Reed checked his personal communicator for the 100th time that day. The final message from Earth had arrived just as they entered the system. President Walsh's words were simple but carried enormous weight. "The future of humanity rests in your hands. Make us proud." No pressure at all, Reed thought grimly. "Docking complete," Captain Liu announced. "All systems show green. Station atmosphere is compatible with human requirements. Ambassador, the station is yours." Reed gathered his team in the ship's main airlock. The 6 people standing with him represented Earth's best hope for a negotiated peace. Besides Foster and Park, the group included General Patricia Hayes, a military advisor who understood both human capabilities and limitations; Dr. Robert Kim, a physicist who could speak to questions about human technology; Maria Santos, a legal expert who had helped draft humanity's preliminary negotiating position; and Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner, a young officer whose job was to maintain communication with the Defiance throughout the negotiations. "Remember," Reed told them as they prepared to board the station, "we're not here to surrender, and we're not here to threaten. We're here to find a way for 2 very different groups to coexist in the same galaxy. Keep your minds open, but don't forget that millions of human lives depend on what we accomplish in the next few days." The airlock doors opened to reveal a corridor that seemed designed for beings much larger than humans. The ceiling stretched 5 meters above their heads, and the walls were covered in some kind of material that shifted color slightly as they walked past. Reed assumed it was some form of environmental control, designed to make different species feel comfortable. Their escort was waiting for them just beyond the airlock. Reed had expected another Cathari, but instead found himself facing a creature that looked like it had been carved from living crystal. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with faceted skin that caught and reflected the corridor's light in beautiful patterns. "Ambassador Reed," the being said, its voice carrying a musical quality that the translator somehow preserved. I am Resonance of Truth, representing the Vortani delegation. I will escort you to your quarters and brief you on station protocols. The formal negotiations begin in 6 hours. As they walked through the station's corridors, Reed noted the other beings they passed. Most stopped to stare at the human delegation, and not all of the attention felt friendly. A group of large, fur-covered creatures watched them with what appeared to be barely controlled hostility. Another species, so thin they seemed almost ethereal, floated rather than walked and whispered, among themselves in voices too quiet for the translators to pick up. The accommodations have been prepared according to your biological requirements, Resonance of Truth explained as they traveled through what appeared to be a commercial district. Earth standard gravity, atmosphere, and temperature. Nutritional requirements will be met by your ship's supplies. As we were uncertain about compatibility with station food systems, Reed nodded his thanks, but his attention was focused on the sheer scale of what they were attempting. Harmony Station housed representatives from 6 different species, each with their own history, culture, and reasons for viewing humanity as a threat. Finding common ground seemed almost impossible, but as they passed a large viewing port showing the UES Defiance docked alongside the station, Reed felt a spark of hope. The massive warship looked strangely peaceful in the artificial lighting, its weapons silent and its crew hidden behind layers of metal and ceramic armor. Maybe, just maybe, Admiral Stone's gamble would pay off. The real negotiations were about to begin. The main conference chamber of Harmony Station defied every expectation Ambassador Reed had formed during his preparation for these negotiations. Instead of a simple meeting room, he found himself entering what could only be described as an environmental maze. The circular space was divided into 6 distinct zones, each carefully maintained to support the specific needs of different alien species. Reed paused at the entrance, taking in the complexity of the setup. One section was filled with a thick orange-tinted atmosphere that glowed with its own internal light. Another area seemed to be underwater, though Reed knew it must be some other liquid that supported aquatic life. A third zone had what appeared to be artificial gravity running in multiple directions, allowing beings to walk on walls and ceilings as easily as floors. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" said Dr. Emily Foster, stepping up beside him. 3 months of studying Confederation species, and I still wasn't prepared for this. The human delegation made their way to their assigned area, a section that had been configured with Earth-standard conditions. As they took their seats around a curved table that seemed to be made from some kind of living wood, Reed studied the other delegations that were already in place. The Cathari delegation occupied the zone directly across from the humans. Reed counted 5 of the blue-skinned, multi-armed beings, all wearing what appeared to be formal diplomatic robes decorated with symbols that probably indicated rank or specialization. At the center of their group sat an elderly Cathari whose deep blue coloration suggested great age and experience. To their left, the Vortani delegation shimmered like a collection of living jewels. The crystal-based beings seemed to communicate through changes in their internal light patterns as much as through words. Reed watched one of them shift from deep purple to bright gold, and back again, apparently conveying some complex idea to its companions. The Brummik delegation was impossible to miss. The 4 massive fur-covered beings looked like someone had crossed a bear with a gorilla, and then scaled the result up by 50%. Their translator devices were larger than the others, probably necessary to handle their subsonic communication methods. The ethereal delegation was the most unsettling. The 5 gossamer-winged beings seemed to barely exist in the same physical space as everyone else. They floated rather than sat, and their translucent bodies made it difficult to tell where one individual ended and another began. The 6th delegation, representing the Nixari, occupied the aquatic zone. Reed could see them moving through their liquid environment, but their forms were so alien that he couldn't even guess at their basic anatomy. At the head of the chamber, positioned so that all delegations could see him clearly, sat the individual who would moderate these negotiations. High Mediator Kral was clearly ancient, even by Cathari standards. His carapace had darkened to an almost navy blue, and his movements carried the careful precision of someone who had overseen many such meetings. Distinguished delegates, Krall began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's advanced translation system. We gather here to address a situation that threatens the stability of our galaxy. The human species has expanded rapidly into space previously considered empty, establishing colonies and building military forces at a rate that concerns all member species of the Confederation. Reed felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes focused on his delegation. The attention was not friendly. Krall continued. However, before we address the terms of human surrender and integration into Confederation oversight, we must discuss the unprecedented nature of their arrival here. Ambassador Reed, would you explain why your species chose to bring a warship to peace negotiations? Reed stood slowly, feeling the practiced calm that had gotten him through dozens of diplomatic crises. Over the years, High Mediator, honored delegates, he began, humanity brought the UES defiance to these negotiations not as a threat, but as a demonstration of our sincerity. A ripple of what Reed assumed was confusion passed through several delegations. The key Brahmic delegation made sounds that the translator rendered as low growls of disapproval. Sincerity? Asked one of the Vortani, its crystalline form shifting to a sharp red color. You speak of peace while bringing instruments of war. Reed had expected this reaction. Delegate harmony of angles, he said, using the Vortani's translated name. Consider what we could have done instead. We could have sent a small defenseless ship and hoped for mercy. We could have arrived with our fleet and demanded terms. Instead, we chose to show you exactly what we are capable of, while simultaneously proving that we have no intention of using that capability against you. The elderly Cathari mediator leaned forward slightly. Explain this reasoning, Ambassador. Reed gestured toward the chamber's main display, which showed a view of the station's exterior. The UES Defiance was clearly visible, docked alongside the facility like a sleeping giant. The Defiance represents the pinnacle of human military technology, Reed said. It carries enough firepower to destroy this entire station along with every ship in the surrounding area. Our journey here took 18 days, during which our weapons remained powered down. We announced our arrival through proper diplomatic channels. We followed your traffic control instructions exactly. At any point, we could have chosen aggression over diplomacy. He paused, looking directly at each delegation in turn. But we didn't. We chose to come here to your facility on your terms and sit down like civilized beings to discuss our differences. If that is not sincerity, I don't know what is. The response was immediate and intense. Several delegations began speaking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of voices. Reed caught fragments of the conversation. Unprecedented, threatening, manipulative, clever. High Mediator Krall raised one of his 4 hands and the chamber fell silent. The human argument is unusual, he said carefully. However, it raises important questions about intentions and capabilities. Before we proceed, each delegation must have the opportunity to state their position. What followed was a carefully orchestrated presentation of grievances. The Vortani spoke of human expansion disrupting trade routes that had been stable for centuries. The Brahmic complained about human military technology that seemed to advance at an impossible rate. The Ethereals expressed concern about human colonization methods that showed little regard for existing ecosystems. But it was the Nexari delegate who raised the issue that Reed had been dreading. Speaking through a complex translation system that converted their water-based communication into audible words, they said, the expansion pattern matches historical precedents that all Confederation species remember with terror. The chamber fell silent. Reed felt his stomach tighten. This was the moment he had feared most. High Mediator Krall's expression became grave. Delegate Deep Current speaks of the Devourers, he said quietly. A species that arose from the Galactic Rim 8 centuries ago. They expanded rapidly, built impressive fleets, and showed remarkable adaptability. When we first encountered them, they seemed much like you humans appear now. Dr. Foster leaned forward in her chair. What happened to them? She asked. The silence stretched for long seconds. Finally, Krall spoke again. They became a threat to all intelligent life in the galaxy. It took the combined forces of all Confederation species 30 years to stop them. Their civilization was reduced to manageable levels. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Reed understood now why every attempt at communication had failed, why the Confederation had been so quick to start shooting when they encountered human colonies. They weren't dealing with a first contact situation. They were trying to prevent what they saw as the return of their worst nightmare. "You think we're them?" Reed said quietly. "You think we're the next devourers?" "The pattern is identical," admitted one of the Brahmic delegates, its translator rendering the words as a low rumble. "Rapid expansion, advanced technology, military capability that exceeds what should be possible for such a young species." Reed looked around the chamber, seeing his own realization reflected in the faces of his team. They weren't here to negotiate the terms of surrender. They were here to prove that humanity deserved to exist at all. The real negotiations were about to begin, and the stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. The revelation about the Devourers changed everything in the conference chamber. Ambassador Reed watched as the alien delegations exchanged glances, gestures, and light patterns that spoke of shared memories and old fears. The weight of history pressed down on the negotiations like a physical force, and Reed realized that humanity was not just fighting for peace, but for the right to exist as a free species. Dr. Emily Foster had gone pale beside him, her xenobiology expertise suddenly providing context for behaviors that had seemed inexplicable. "The defensive positions," she whispered to Reed. "The way they always retreated after successful attacks. They weren't trying to conquer us. They were testing us." Reed nodded grimly. Every battle of the 3-year war made sense now when viewed through the lens of the Confederation's historical trauma. They had been probing human responses, looking for signs that humanity would follow the same path as the species that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization 8 centuries ago. Hi-Oh, Mediator Kral activated the chamber's central display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where the ancient Devourer civilization had once held territory. The scale was staggering compared to the tiny blue dots that represented current human colonies. "At their height," Kral explained, his voice heavy with memory, "the Devourers controlled 800 star systems and had a population of over 200 billion. Their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything the Confederation could field." General Patricia Hayes, the human military advisor, studied the display with professional interest. "What made them so dangerous?" she asked, "besides their size and technology?" It was one of the ethereal delegates who answered, its gossamer wings shimmering as it spoke. "They consumed everything," Whisper of Stars said, its translated voice carrying an otherworldly quality. "Not just resources, but entire biospheres. They would strip a planet bare, use its materials to build more ships and habitats, then move on to the next world. They viewed all other life as raw material for their expansion." Reed felt a chill run down his spine. "And you see the same pattern in human expansion?" "The similarities are undeniable," said the lead Brahmic delegate, its massive form shifting in what Reed had learned was a sign of agitation. "Rapid colonization, advanced technology developed in isolation, military capability that seems to exceed your species' age and experience. But there's one crucial difference," Reed said, standing and walking to the display. He gestured to the human colonies, tiny specks compared to the vast Devourer territories. "Scale. You're talking about a civilization that controlled 800 systems. Humanity has 15 colonies scattered across 47 light years. Our total population is 800 million people." The chamber fell silent as the delegates processed this information. Reed could see them doing the calculations, comparing the numbers to their historical records. Captain Liu's voice came through Reed's personal communicator, having listened to the proceedings from the Defiance. "Ambassador, request permission to address the delegates directly." Reed looked to High Mediator Kral, who nodded approval. Moments later, Liu's image appeared on one of the chamber's secondary screens. Honored delegates, Liu began. I command the UES Defiance, which your sensors have identified as humanity's most advanced warship. I want to share some information that might put our military capability in perspective. The alien delegates focused, their attention on the screen, clearly interested in what the commander of humanity's most powerful vessel had to say. The Defiance carries a crew of 8,000, Liu continued. It took 3 years to build and represents the absolute pinnacle of human military engineering. Based on your questions and concerns, I believe you've overestimated our fleet strength. This ship, the one docked at your station, is not one of many. It is the only one. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several delegates began speaking, at once their translators creating a buzz of overlapping voices. Reed caught fragments. Impossible. Deception. Only one? High Mediator Krall raised his hand for silence. Captain Liu, are you saying that humanity's entire deep space military capability is represented by a single vessel? That's correct, Liu replied. We have smaller ships for patrol and escort duties, but nothing comparable to the Defiance. When we decided to come to these negotiations, we literally brought our entire strategic military force with us. The implications rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. Reed watched as the delegates absorbed this information, seeing their entire understanding of the human threat being rewritten in real time. Dr. Robert Kim, the human physicist, requested permission to speak. If I may add something, he said, our technology development has been focused on efficiency rather than quantity. We've had to be innovative because we lack the industrial base for mass production. Every human ship is custom-built, incorporating lessons learned from previous designs. This is why your technology seems so advanced, observed one of the Vortani, its crystalline form shifting to a thoughtful blue color. You are not mass-producing standardized designs. You are constantly improving and adapting. Exactly, Kim replied. When you have limited resources, you have to make every ship count. The Defiance incorporates 3 years of continuous innovation, but it's also the product of a civilization that simply can't afford to build dozens of such vessels. The mood in the chamber began to shift. Reed could sense the delegates reassessing everything they thought they knew about humanity's intentions and capabilities, but he knew they needed more than just numbers to overcome 8 centuries of historical trauma. High Mediator, Reed said, may I request access to our military records? I want to show you something that I think will be relevant to these discussions. Krall nodded, and Reed activated his delegation's data interface. The chamber's main display shifted to show a tactical summary of every major battle in the 3-year war. This is a complete record of human military action since first contact, Reed explained. Every engagement, every battle, every strategic decision our forces have made. He highlighted specific engagements, showing fleet movements and tactical decisions. Notice anything unusual about our combat patterns? It was the Nexari delegate who spoke first. Its water-based communication system creating ripples of meaning that the translator rendered as, "You have never carried the offensive deep into our territory." That's correct, Reed confirmed. In 3 years of warfare, humanity has never once attacked a Confederation homeworld, a civilian target, or even a major military installation in your core systems. Every battle we fought has been defensive, responding to Confederation forces entering systems we had already claimed. General Hayes stood and walked to the display. Ambassador Reed has given you the strategic overview, but let me add the tactical perspective. In every engagement, human forces have focused on disabling rather than destroying enemy vessels whenever possible. Our weapons are designed to neutralize threats, not maximize casualties. She pointed to specific battle records. Here, at the Kepler 442 engagement, human forces disabled 7 Confederation ships and allowed them to retreat rather than finishing them off. Here, at Wolf 359, we provided medical aid to enemy survivors after the battle ended. This is not the behavior of a species bent on conquest. The chamber fell silent as the delegates studied the data. Reed could see them processing not just the information, but the implications of what it meant about human intentions and character. Finally, High Mediator Kral spoke. These records suggest a different interpretation of human actions than what we had concluded from our intelligence reports. We've been fighting the wrong war, whispered one of the ethereal delegates, its words barely picked up by the translation system. Reed felt a spark of hope for the first time since the negotiations began. We've all been fighting the wrong war, he said. You've been trying to prevent the return of the Devourers, and we've been trying to defend our right to exist. But the Devourers are gone, and we're not them. Maybe it's time to find a different way forward. The real breakthrough was about to begin. The transformation in the conference chamber was remarkable. What had begun as a tense confrontation between species separated by fear and misunderstanding had evolved into something entirely different. Ambassador Reed watched as delegates who had seemed ready for war just hours earlier now leaned forward in their seats, engaged in the kind of detailed discussion that only happened when people genuinely wanted to find solutions. The breakthrough had come when Captain Liu made an offer that no one had expected. Speaking directly to the assembled delegates through the chamber's communication system, he had proposed something that went far beyond traditional diplomatic protocols. The UES Defiance will remain at Harmony Station, Liu had announced, his words causing a stir throughout the chamber. Not as a hostage or a prize of war, but as a symbol of human commitment to peaceful coexistence. Our crew will contribute to station operations, share non-military technologies, and demonstrate through their actions what humanity truly stands for. The proposal had been so unexpected that several delegates had needed time to process what they were hearing. The idea of voluntarily leaving their most powerful military asset in potentially hostile territory went against every conventional wisdom about negotiations. High Mediator Kral had been the first to respond. Captain Liu, you understand that this would place your vessel and crew entirely within Confederation space, subject to our laws and oversight? I understand completely, Liu had replied, and I believe it's exactly what we need to do. For 3 years, both sides have been making decisions based on fear and incomplete information. The only way to overcome that is through direct experience. Dr. Emily Foster had stood to support the proposal. The Defiance isn't just a warship, she explained to the delegates. It's a complete research and development facility. Our medical bay can treat injuries from dozens of different species. Our laboratories are equipped for advanced scientific research. Our engineering workshops can fabricate components and tools that might be useful for station maintenance. You would share your technology? Asked one of the Vortani delegates, its crystalline form shifting to colors that Reed had learned indicated intense interest. Non-military technology, yes, Reed confirmed. Our medical knowledge, environmental systems, manufacturing techniques. We believe that cooperation benefits everyone involved. The offer had sparked intense debate among the alien delegations. Reed watched as they conferred among themselves using methods of communication that ranged from subsonic growls to patterns of colored light. The diversity of their species was remarkable, but their shared concern about human intentions created common ground for discussion. It was the Brahmic delegate who raised the most practical concerns. This is unprecedented in Confederation history, the massive being rumbled through its translator. How do we know this is not some elaborate deception? How do we verify that your intentions are genuine? General Patricia Hayes stepped forward. You verify it the same way we're asking you to trust us, she said. Through time and direct experience, station a Confederation observer aboard the Defiance. Monitor our communications. Watch everything we do. If our actions don't match our words, you'll know immediately. The suggestion was bold, but Reed could see its wisdom. Transparency was the only way to overcome the deep mistrust that had led to 3 years of warfare. Dr. Robert Kim added his support to the proposal. From a scientific perspective, this arrangement offers benefits to all parties. Human and Confederation researchers working together could make advances that neither could achieve alone. Our different approaches to problem solving could complement each other. The debate continued for hours, but gradually Reed could sense the mood shifting. The delegates were no longer asking whether humans could be trusted, but how to structure an arrangement that would benefit everyone while providing adequate safeguards. High Mediator Krall finally called for a formal recess. All delegations will have 4 hours to consult with their governments, he announced. When we reconvene, we will vote on whether to accept the human proposal and begin drafting a comprehensive peace agreement. As the alien delegates dispersed to their various communication centers, Reed found himself alone with his team in their assigned quarters. The reality of what they had proposed was beginning to sink in. We just offered to leave our most powerful warship in the hands of people who were shooting at us yesterday, James Park observed, his economic advisor's practical mind focusing on the risks involved. We offered to prove that we're not the enemy, Reed corrected. Sometimes that requires taking risks that seem unreasonable. Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner had been monitoring communications with Earth throughout the negotiations. Ambassador, he said, I'm getting some interesting responses from our monitoring stations. It seems several Confederation fleets have begun powering down their weapons and returning to patrol status rather than full combat readiness. Reed felt a spark of hope. If the Confederation military was already responding to the negotiations by reducing their threat posture, it suggested that the political leadership was seriously considering the human proposals. When the delegations reconvened, High Mediator Krall looked more optimistic than Reed had seen him since the negotiations began. The Confederation Council has reviewed the human proposals, Krall announced. While unprecedented, they have decided to accept the offer on a trial basis. The UES Defiance will remain at Harmony Station for a period of 1 standard year. During that time, human crew members will contribute to station operations and collaborate with Confederation scientists and engineers. The relief in the chamber was palpable, but Krall continued with the specific terms. In exchange, all military actions between human and Confederation forces will cease immediately. Human colonies will be recognized as legitimate settlements, and trade relationships will be established between human and Confederation worlds. A joint commission will be formed to address any disputes that arise during this transition period. Reed stood to respond. On behalf of humanity, we accept these terms. But we'd like to propose one addition. At the end of the trial year, we request that Earth be formally invited to join the Galactic Confederation as its 7th member species. The suggestion caused another stir among the delegates, but this time, the reaction seemed more surprised than hostile. You wish to join the organization you have been fighting? Asked one of the ethereal delegates, its gossamer form shimmering, with what Reed hoped was amusement rather than disbelief. We wish to join the community we should have been part of from the beginning, Reed replied. This war happened because we didn't understand each other. Membership in the Confederation would ensure that such misunderstandings never happen again. The formal treaty signing took place 6 hours later in the station's main ceremonial chamber. Representatives from all 7 species, including humanity, placed their signatures, seals, or other forms of official approval on a document that would reshape galactic politics. Captain Liu was the last to sign, representing not just the crew of the Defiance but all of humanity's military forces. As he placed his name on the treaty, he looked up at the assembled delegates. When we brought a warship to peace talks, he said, we didn't know if we were making the biggest mistake in human history or taking the first step toward a better future. I think we have our answer. 3 months later, Reed stood in the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching human and alien crew members working together to install new environmental systems that would make the facility even more comfortable for its diverse population. The sight would have been unimaginable just a year earlier. Dr. Foster joined him at the viewing port. The medical exchange program is exceeding all expectations, she reported. Human techniques for treating radiation exposure have saved dozens of lives, and the Confederation's knowledge of exotic biology has revolutionized our understanding of genetic diseases. Through the transparent aluminum, Reed could see the UES Defiance at its permanent berth, no longer a symbol of human military might but a testament to the power of taking risks for peace. The ship's crew had become some of the most popular residents of the station, known for their willingness to help with any problem and their apparently endless curiosity about alien cultures. The gamble had paid off beyond anyone's wildest dreams. By bringing their most powerful weapon to the peace talks, Humanity had demonstrated something that no amount of diplomatic protocol could have conveyed, that they were willing to be vulnerable in pursuit of understanding. A year later, when Earth was formally welcomed as the seventh member of the Galactic Confederation, historians would mark the moment as the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization. But Reed knew the real breakthrough had happened much earlier, in a conference chamber where enemies had chosen to become partners. The UES Defiance remained at Harmony Station for 3 years, its crew serving as informal ambassadors for humanity. When Captain Liu finally returned to Earth, it was aboard a new class of vessel designed jointly by human and Confederation engineers. The ship carried no weapons, but its advanced propulsion system and scientific equipment represented the kind of progress that was only possible when different species worked together. Admiral Stone, now retired, attended the Defiance's homecoming ceremony. When asked by reporters whether his decision to send a warship to peace talks had been strategy or luck, he smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "the best way to end a war is to prove you never wanted to fight it in the first place." The Defiance didn't win the peace by being powerful. It won by showing that power and wisdom could exist in the same place. The age of human isolation was over. The age of galactic cooperation had begun, and it had all started with the most unlikely diplomatic mission in the history of the galaxy.